Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display floating above her workstation, her dark eyes reflecting the swirling mathematical equations that had consumed her life for the past 18 months. The cramped laboratory aboard the UES Harmony hummed with the low vibration of the ship's engines, a constant reminder that humanity was losing this war. Badly. The Zephyrian Empire had been systematically crushing human colonies for 3 years now, their superior technology and ancient understanding of quantum mechanics making them nearly unstoppable. Their crystalline ships phased through human defenses like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before retaliation was possible. Still playing with your impossible mathematics, Dr. Vasquez? The condescending voice belonged to High, researcher Kethvar, the Altarian scientist who served as the Coalition's chief theoretical physicist. His elongated cranium pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that indicated smug superiority, an expression Elena had grown to despise over their months of forced collaboration. The phase variance calculations are consistent, Elena replied without looking up, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. If I can just stabilize the quantum resonance frequency. Humans, Kethvar interrupted with a dismissive gesture of his four-fingered hand. Always believing you can solve complex problems with brute force mathematics. The Zephyrians have mastered quantum phase technology for millennia. Your species has barely begun to understand the basic principles. Around the laboratory, other alien scientists, Rigelians with their insectoid features, gaseous nebulans contained in environmental suits, and several others, paused their work to observe the familiar confrontation. Their various forms of communication buzzed with what Elena recognized as amusement. The human scientist had become something of a joke among the Coalition's intellectual elite. The human persistence is admirable, clicked Zarthex, a Rigelian quantum theorist, but ultimately futile. Perhaps Dr. Vasquez should focus on more practical applications of her mathematical skills. Elena's jaw tightened, but she refused to rise to the bait. She had heard it all before. How humans were too young, too primitive, too emotional to contribute meaningfully to advanced scientific research. Every failure, every dead end in her calculations, was met with knowing nods and barely concealed expressions of "I told you so." But Elena had grown up in the slums of Neo-Mumbai, where giving up meant starving. She had clawed her way through universities that told her she wasn't smart enough, past professors who insisted that quantum mechanics was too complex for someone from her background. She had faced down poverty, discrimination, and academic snobbery, with nothing but stubborn determination and an unshakable belief that mathematics was the universal language that could solve any problem. The war had only made her more determined. For hours after the aliens had retired to their quarters, Elena remained at her station. The ship's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, but her mind blazed with calculations. She pulled up the latest intelligence reports from the front lines. Another human colony wiped out, another fleet destroyed by Zephyrian phase attacks. The breakthrough came at 0347 hours ship time. Elena was reviewing the quantum field equations for the 1,000th time when she noticed something that made her breath catch. The Zephyrian phase technology wasn't just manipulating quantum states, it was exploiting a fundamental asymmetry in the universe's basic structure. They were using dark matter interactions to create localized space-time distortions, essentially existing in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. But asymmetries, Elena knew, always had corresponding symmetries. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction. For every quantum state, a conjugate state. For every phase shift, a counterphase. Her fingers flew across the interface as equations cascaded through her mind. The mathematics was elegant, beautiful in its simplicity once you understood the underlying principles. Where the Zephyrians created positive phase variance, she could create negative phase variance. Where they shifted into higher dimensional spaces, she could anchor them to lower ones. By dawn, she had it. The phase lock equation, a mathematical framework that could not only predict Zephyrian phase movements, but actively prevent them. It was theoretically sound, practically implementable, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Elena burst into the main laboratory as the alien scientists were beginning their daily routines. her excitement barely contained. "I've solved it," she announced, uploading her calculations to the central display. "The phase variance problem. I know how to stop them." Kethavar's cranium flickered with dismissive patterns. "Dr. Vasquez, please. We have discussed this repeatedly. The mathematics are simply too complex." He stopped mid-sentence as the equations filled the holographic space above them. Elena watched his bioluminescent patterns shift from dismissal to confusion to something approaching awe. "Impossible," whispered Zarthex, compound eyes fixed on the cascading mathematics. "The quantum recursion loops, the dimensional anchoring protocols. This is brilliant," finished Dr. Ysera, a nebulan whose gaseous form swirled with agitation. "The phase-lock matrix would create a quantum cage around any ship attempting dimensional variance. They would be locked into our reality, vulnerable to conventional weapons." Within 6 hours, Elena's equation had been transmitted to every human ship in the fleet. Within 12 hours, the first Zephyrian raiders found themselves trapped in normal space as human destroyers emerged from hiding. Within 18 hours, the mighty Zephyrian battle fleet, invincible for 3 years, was being systematically destroyed by conventional human firepower. The war ended not with a bang, but with a mathematical proof. Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Force found Elena in her laboratory 3 days later, still working despite having become the most famous scientist in human space. "Dr. Vasquez," the Admiral said quietly, "I wanted to thank you personally. You've saved humanity." Elena looked up from her new calculations. She was already working on improvements to human FTL technology, inspired by the principles she had discovered. "I just did the math, Admiral. Turns out the universe has rules, and once you understand them..." She gestured at the holographic equations surrounding her, elegant mathematical poetry that had turned the tide of an interstellar war. "Once you understand them, anything is possible." In the weeks that followed, as humanity began to reverse engineer Zephyrian technology using Elena's mathematical framework, the alien scientists who had once mocked her began requesting transfers to work under her guidance. They had learned something important about humans, something the galaxy would not soon forget. Never underestimate a species that had learned to split atoms before they could properly feed themselves, that had put footprints on their moon before they had eliminated poverty, that could find elegant mathematical solutions to impossible problems when their backs were against the wall. Never underestimate humanity's greatest weapon, their absolute stubborn refusal to accept that something couldn't be done.